You doing, everybody in Strong Inspirations land? I know you watching me because I got another doozy today. I got a guy, he know what he talking about. He said he's ready. I'm ready. We're going to get it on. You know, I'm Anthony Brogdon here at Strong Inspirations, where we give it to you straight, no chaser. I let them do the talking. I just come up with a few questions because they said something and I want to make sure I understand. And I figure if I understand, you, my listeners and my viewers, you'll understand. So thank you for joining us again today. I ask that if you will, hit the subscribe button on this channel. It's free. And all it does is let me know how many people have joined in officially, let's say. I invite you to hit the like button on this video because it's going to be good. I promise you. You hit the like button as soon as possible. It's on. I ask that you hit that notifications bell because I'm putting up 4 or 5 videos a week. I mean, I'm finding people finding me now. And then when I put a new video up and I don't have no regular schedule, you get a little ding or something like that so that you know that there's a new video on Strong Inspirations. And then, my brothers and my sisters, I ask if you will tell somebody about the channel. Do not keep this to yourself so that you can be the smartest one on the block. That don't make sense. Share it with them, all right? Also, you know I got a movie out. It's called Business in the Black, The Rise of Black Business in America. This is good. Some people have even said to me it's the finest documentary ever made about the rise of black business in America. So it's well worth you watching this. I'm telling you, I promise you. It's on Amazon. This is the DVD case, as you see here. And so it's available in both options, but you know, I know a lot of the DVD players are going by the new technology. So it is streaming on Amazon also. And it's called Business in the Black. The other thing is I got a book out. You know, I'm a historian. So I kind of, you know a little bit about this, and I've been doing these interviews for a while. So that even made me more proficient, let's say. But my book is, took me a couple years to write it. I got over 200 facts in here. Amazing facts, I'm telling you, because I didn't know it until I began to, do the research, and then it, got one of them ha-ha moments. Oh, really? I didn't know that. And so please come on and order my book. I invite you to do such. And if you order it, I'll autograph it for you. And my hand is getting kind of hard now, my arthritis and stuff, because I've been selling a pretty good number of books lately. So I appreciate all my purchasers. But go ahead and order it. It's called Black Business Book. It also is available on Amazon. But I also say, if you want to, you can go directly to my website, which is businessintheblack.net. Businessintheblack.net. So you see what I'm doing. I'm jamming. I'm having, man, this is so much fun. This guy right here, good looking guy, he's smiling. He say, I'm ready to go, man. Come on, let me tell my story. So we're gonna go ahead and say, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and let's get it on.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. Thanks for having me on. My name is Preston Mitchell, and I am a retired basketball coach and educator at the University of Virginia's College at Wise. And I am currently, even in retirement, working on a project, actually a chapter in Dr. Bill Turner's Black in Appalachia Redux. Dr. Turner co-authored the anthology Black in Appalachia in 1985, and he's doing another one. And he and I became acquainted a few years ago, and he discovered a narrative that I had written about a freedman family from Lee County, Virginia, who after the Civil War went up on top of Black Mountain, which is the highest mountain in Kentucky. It straddles the Virginia-Kentucky border. And here, this remarkable man, Dan Richmond, ended up owning 1,000 acres of land,
Wow.
Kentucky and Virginia. And there he had a settlement of about 6 houses, and he got up to probably about 46 people living up there. But he was the patriarch. He and his wife Mary, Dan was born in 1823, and he moved up there somewhere between 1871 and 1875.
Okay, let me stop you right there. So he was born in 1823. So he was enslaved at the time.
Indeed, he was. Yeah, he was born in South Carolina. We don't really know how, but he was the slave of a man, Colonel Jonathan Richmond, a colonel in the Confederate Army, and the second largest slave owner in Lee County, Virginia. Now, Lee County, Virginia, for you all, is the westernmost county in Virginia. And today it's the poorest county in Virginia. At the time that Dan was enslaved, there were about 780 slaves living in Lee County, which was very rich in still growing tobacco. But he was, after the Civil War was over, he stayed there on Jonathan Richmond's farm.
He who? The guy we talking about, or the landowner?
The landowner. Yeah.
The landowner, okay.
He stayed there until Colonel Richmond died in 1871. And then he went up on the mountain. Now, Colonel Richmond owned this, he had title to this 1,000 acres, but in time, it gets rather complex, but Dan ended up getting clear title to the land. He purchased it from Colonel Richmond's heirs.
Okay, let me stop you right there. Now, Colonel Richmond, he owned slaves. What happened during the Civil War? They didn't run him off his land, or what happened then?
He was in the he commanded forces, and after it was over, he just returned to his land. And how many of those slaves stayed, I don't know, but Dan did stay until his master died, and then he left. And we know that from the census records of 1870. But also we know in 1870 that Dan, even though being a freedman, did possess a certain amount of money and a certain amount of
the enslaved guy did. He owned money.
Yeah, he did. It shows up in the 1870 census that he did own money. And he went up here on the mountain, and he shows up in a history book written in 1927 about a man who was making a travels across the mountain, and he stayed the night with Dan and was given supper and a place to sleep for the night. And
okay, but I thought Dan was born in 23, and how did he do that in 27? I'm trying to find. I'm making sure I'm right on this.
No, he was born in 1823. Right. 1927, there was a history of the area written.
1927. I got you.
Mentioning him.
Okay, let me go. Let me make sure I got it. So Dan is the enslaved guy. He is now this master his is not his father or something like that, and he has.
No, it's not. That's been thrown out, but I think that's been disproved because both in the census records, Dan says he was born in South Carolina, and we end up his sister somehow reconnects with him, and she moves up in the mountains. And his sister on her death certificate claims being born in South Carolina. And there was no evidence that the master had ever been in South Carolina.
Okay.
And he's also described, as far as his color, he is described as a black man, whereas a couple of the people on the mountain are listed in the census as mulatto. Dan is not listed as mulatto.
Okay, so he might not be a lighter complected guy. He might be a darker complected guy.
Pardon?
He might be a darker complected guy, Dan.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's been tossed out by some people that I've talked to, saying, how come he came up on this mountain and his Colonel Richmond, they ended up selling for a very modest cost, all of that land. Was he Colonel Richmond's son?
Right.
And I don't think he was because of the records that he was born in South Carolina.
Okay, let me go back to Colonel Richmond. Is Colonel Richmond known to be? Do you have records? He's got so many slaves. Is he a mean slave master, or he's kind of not so bad, or how did him and Dan connect so well?
Yeah, that's a good question, and because in the slave records of 1860, Dan appears as his oldest slave. 1860, Dan's 37 years old, and that's the oldest slave there on Colonel Richmond's land. Probably Colonel Richmond purchased that land from a man named John Flannery in 1851. And so there's a good chance that Dan, at that time, was in his 20s, probably went up with his master to kind of survey what's on this mountain. It sits up, the bluff spur sits up about 3,700 feet above sea level, and it's a treacherous place to come up today. There's nothing on there today on top of the mountain. When I drive up there, I have a 4-wheel drive vehicle, and the last 4 miles are through rutted roads and all. But there is a cemetery there that I was trying to get to. There's a cemetery there with at least 17 graves. And this cemetery is the people that lived up there that are buried up there. But so, yeah, I mean, the connection would be, I think the assumption would be that he was, I mean, slavery in and all of itself, the idea that it's some kind of benevolent institution is patently false in my mind. But human beings are human beings, and some are mean and some are nice. Some are kind and so some are not. Apparently, Dan, upon getting his freedom after the Civil War, didn't leave. He stayed.
Yeah, that's what I heard you say.
Some kind of good relationship with him. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, let's go back to the colonel. The colonel, he hit on his property, and he's got 1,000 acres. He's doing tobacco, you say?
Probably, yeah. That's a tobacco area. Lee County has a big valley. Just to give you some context, Anthony, the bordering county of Lee is Wise County, and Wise County had less than 60 slaves, whereas Lee County had 787 in the census of 1860. The topography of the two counties are much different. Wise County is much more mountainous, not conducive to large-scale farming. Lee County was, and hence you have the difference in the number of enslaved people.
So he's got, so how many, you said that now the colonel has how many slaves, and there's other plantations near there that have slaves
right.
too.
He had the second most slaves. Yeah, when I say plantation, I'm probably using that term rather loosely, what constitutes a plantation opposed to a farm. 27 is not that many slaves if you go and look at places in Southside Virginia, South Carolina, any of these where oftentimes there were over 100 slaves. There was nothing on that scale. Excuse me, he had 34. On 1860, he had 34. Okay. There was one other man named Flannery in the western part of the county that had more slaves, but he was the second largest slaveholder in the county.
And you say Colonel Richmond, evidently he liked the institution of slavery so much, he fought and led troops in the Confederate Army.
Yes, he did.
Is there anything known about how successful he was in whatever battles he had?
I don't have that information, Anthony. Okay. His grave is still there with last time I saw, there was a flagpole with not the rebel Confederate flag we're used to seeing, but rather the Confederate stars and bars with the white and the Confederate state flag is over his grave.
Now, and his grave is where?
His grave is at the old home place in Turkey Cove in the eastern part of Lee County.
Oh, okay. So now how far from where their land is the mountain where they go up to this mountain?
Probably as the crow flies, less than 20 miles.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And we should suspect that they tracked that mountain on horse and buggy or something like that. They didn't do it walking, I'm sure.
And they probably did do some by walking. The trails up there, I tell you, it's pretty steep. It's pretty formidable, and probably some horses. And there were some trails, and eventually there was a road, a wagon road that went across the mountain. But when Dan lived there, there were very few houses, and his house is on top of the mountain on what's called the Bluff Spur of Black Mountain. His colony of 6 houses were the only houses there. We know that from the census records,
okay,
as well as from some of the stories.
Let me make sure I get this right. Okay, so the colonel has all this land at the bottom of the mountain.
Well, not really at the bottom of the mountain. He's got it more. I mean, the land is not adjacent. No.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of land in between. He had purchased that land, and what made him purchase that land, I don't know. This is long before coal was discovered on that mountain. I'm going to get to that because they ends up selling all 1,000 acres to the Virginia Iron and Coke Company, which makes him a very wealthy man.
Dan does.
Yeah, Dan becomes a very wealthy man.
Okay, I like it.
By selling that. So he's up there with this colony of people when agents from the north, essentially, began to come down into the mountains of central Appalachia, buying up land, buying up coal, mineral rights for land, buying up land outright in the late 19th century. A man by the name of Calvin Pardee. You can look him up on Wikipedia. He was an important businessman out of Philadelphia. And he came down and began buying up this land. And over time, over a 3 or 4 year period, Dan negotiates with him and sells all 1,000 acres for $10,000.
That's a lot of money at that time.
It's a heck of a lot of money.
Right.
Land is essentially the staple of wealth. And yet this man did. This man acquired land, this man acquired money. And we're going to see as I talk about his ancestors, the success and of these people that came from this living a farming life on top of a formidable mountain.
Okay, let me stop you right there. I got to go back to this point. I got to make sure I'm understanding this right. When I think of a land on a mountain, I think of the land not being flat, but kind of, curved downwards or something like that. And you put in the house into the mountain. Is that?
Yeah. Well, again, you get ridges on mountains. You get ridges that are, so wide, and the Bluff Spur does drop off. When I go up there and I ride the roads with my 4-wheel, I'm guesstimating probably the ridge is a very wide ridge, probably a 1/4 mile wide.
Now hold on. When you say ridge, I'm a city boy. When you say ridge, you mean a flat piece of land.
I'm talking about a flat piece of land on top of the mountain.
I got you.
And then it kind of does, as your mind's talking about, kind of slope down pretty steep.
I got you.
No way you can put a house on that. But now on the ridge where it's kind of flat, and it runs flat, the Bluff Spur runs flat. Oh, I would say, I'm doing some guesstimating here, but I would say that ridge goes, for about 1.5 miles.
I got you. Okay,
yeah,
I like
so
it.
about a mile. You got a lot of land to farm if you clear cut those trees and build your barn and build your houses and as people lived throughout the country on subsistence farming. That's what Dan was doing up here.
Now you got to imagine back in those days to build a house up on the hill, on the mountain, on a ridge. It's got to be incredible to get the wood up there, to get whatever.
Well, the wood's already up there. The wood's up there. It's woods in the trees. They cut the trees down. Yeah. Yeah,
Or maybe it's not as difficult as you might think.
Huh?
Maybe it's not as difficult as one might think.
Well, it's right as far as getting. It's not like going to the hardware store and getting tools and everything. You're using the resources that you have.
I see. I got you. I like it.
What's
Okay,
available.
One
thing for sure, though, is when he sold that land in the 1890s, 1899 was the last piece. In the title to the deed that's on record, it mentions the cemetery and says they can't do anything to the cemetery as long as it's maintained. And so even though they've mined coal up there, even though they've stripped all the timber from there, you've got a graveyard, which is about 40 yards wide by probably 40 yards by 20 yards in these graves. And you can drive up there and you can go to that place, which I think is a very holy place, very sacred place, and see those people that settled there, people that died there on top of the mountain.
Let me ask you this now. I think this is the thing that gets me, and I'm clear on all the other particulars. If Dan does this back in those days and he has his land, why don't some racist person come up there and just take it from him, massacre him, you know what I mean, and drive him off the land and say, now it's mine? How did he avoid people finding out about him and somebody getting mad at him?
That's a good question, because that happened. That sort of thing did happen. It's documented it happened.
I'm sure.
In places in the South. You know, all I can say is to that is what we read about the two history books that mentioned him. The one that I find fascinating is him going to Kentucky every spring with his horse, and there not only helping to used his horse. He made some money, I'm sure, studying this big red horse, but also the documents say he would lead the people in worship. He was a preacher and he was respected. And so the respect that he had in the community was strong enough, I suppose, to say that he's somebody not to be messed with. The other thing is too, is you might say, before he sold it to the coal company, somebody said, who in the world want to go all the way up there on the mountain and have a farm? Right. You know? But it also, you raised the question, what about Colonel Richmond children that gave him, well, they sold it for like $200, but one of them, when he needed to perfect that deed to sell it, this woman, Colonel Richmond's, one of his children who had part of that, 100 acres of it, and she lived in Texas, she gave it to him for $1. She gave it to him for $1.
Okay.
It's on the deed. So there was this generally a good feeling between the families. When Dan ended up going to Hawkins County, Tennessee, and made his last will and testament, Dan was never a literate man. On the documents, you have his X, his mark was made. When he made his last will,
so he was illiterate, or he could read and write, or he could not.
He could not. He could not read and write.
He accomplished this and couldn't even read and write.
Right. When he made his last will and testament, the lawyer that helped him write that was Colonel Richmond's son-in-law, who was a lawyer in Hawkins County. You know, he didn't read and write. But let me tell you some of the people that came from that mountain. One of them was a man by the name of Ulysses Tartar. Ulysses Tartar was born on that mountain, ended up becoming a physician, graduating from Meharry University in Nashville, and went to Cleveland, Ohio, where he not only was a physician, but he was a founding member of the first Black Savings and Loans Company. He's buried in Lakeview Cemetery, which is the prominent cemetery in Cleveland with presidents and ball players and all of this sort of thing. Another descendant, a great grandson, was a man by the name of Vivian Henderson. And Vivian Henderson was the president of Clark University in Atlanta, Georgia, in the 1950s. One of his descendants, who I was just on the phone with recently, is retired Dr. Granville Brown, who was the president of Community College in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Wow.
Biff Henderson, who was a speechwriter, who was a writer for the David Letterman show and often appeared on the David Letterman show, is a great grandson of Dan Richmond.
Wow. So what you can assume is, okay, hold on. If they grew up on that property, where were they educated?
Well, the people that were grouped, I'm talking, these people that I mentioned are descendants of people that lived there.
Yeah, okay.
They weren't educated anywhere on that mountain Yeah. No, it was when they left the mountain around the turn of the 20th century, around 1900, and they went to various parts. They went to Bristol, they went to Hawkins County, Tennessee, they went to Cleveland, well, ended up in Cleveland, Ohio. They ended up being scattered to a lot of different places. But this family is a pretty remarkable family, and what they've attained. And my theory is it all goes back to Dan. It always goes back to this man who had the vision, the courage, the work ethic to produce this farming community that he sold to the coal companies, and wealth was created and dispersed among this family, who could then go out and become very prominent people.
Okay, as we kind of come to a close, let me get a feel. So Dan born in 23. When does he buy the land? How old is he?
When did he buy the land? Probably he had to perfect the deeds. He did it anywhere from the 1870s into the 1890s. So yeah, he was already in his 50s and 60s.
Yeah, he's 50 years old. And then you figure he's 70 when he sold it to the coal company.
That's right.
Okay. Does he ever get to, and he's wealthy, I guess, especially, at 70, does he ever get to, do you see any signs of him buying nice clothes or anything, any of the trappings of having the money?
It's hard to tell. I don't see any of that. We do have him purchasing a very modest home in Rogersville, Tennessee. My theory is that he went there because of educational opportunities. In Rogersville, there was founding of a black junior college, Swift Junior College. Rogersville also at that time had black policemen, kind of rare around the turn of the century, that he saw some opportunities there. But no, he didn't really have the trappings. And when he wrote his will, and by that time he had many grandchildren, as well as he had 8 children. He divided that money up.
Okay. Last question, I guess. Is there a monument or something of that sort, historical marker in his honor anywhere?
That's what we're working on, Anthony. That's a good question. I think that's I'll say what Dr. Turner said when he said, we need to do something to honor this man, because as he said, the white South has all these Confederate memorials. We've got a man here who overcame great odds, whose prodigies, whose descendants have become prominent people. There needs to be something. The problem would be if we put a marker up there on the bluff spur, nobody'd see it, because you got to have a 4-wheel drive truck.
Yeah, I got you.
To go up there.
Yeah, let me ask you. This leads into maybe still, all the questions keep copping at me. Does Booker T. Washington know of him? The National Business League? Are you hear any connection with them? All those prominent business people?
I would think not.
So he's off the radar. The people.
Exactly.
Oh, I got you. Because the Booker T. Washington, the National Business League is 1900. And when did Dan die? Dan
died in early 1907. We can't pinpoint. I do not have a death certificate. I have his will, which was recorded in December of 1906. And somebody wrote in the margin of that will, died in the spring of 1907.
Of natural causes? Natural causes?
Well, yeah, I would guess what would that make him? That would make him almost what, make him in his 80s.
Yeah, I got you. Well, is there a question that I have not asked you? Something
No,
that
I think I think the story. I would like to say this. As one looks at the records of the life of Dan Richmond, one can see the truth in the oral tale told by Harvey Sturgill and celebrated in song by Doc Frazier. Yes, Dan was a former slave who left to come to the top of Black Mountain and live there with his family. Indeed, Dan did sell his land and move to Tennessee. It appears also Dan was a religious man despite his illiteracy. However, there are several discrepancies in the oral tales and the historical truth. First of all, and what would be surprising to his Kentucky folk tellers, Dan did not come to Kentucky. The houses were on the Virginia side of the mountain, and it was Wise, Virginia, not Whitesburg, Kentucky, that Dan reported deaths, filed live births, and recorded marriage ceremonies. Secondly, Dan did not run away to his freedom. Ironically, it was his loyalty that allowed him to come to the top of Black Mountain, live there in peace, and eventually sell it for what was at the time a great deal of money. Yet if not in theory, surely in spirit, Dan Richmond gained his freedom on top of Black Mountain. He was the lord of the manor where he could hunt wild game, farm his own food, and nurture his spirit in what is still one of the most beautiful places on earth, a place that bears his name today, the Dan Fields.
Whew. Thank you so very much for coming on the show and telling us that story, because sometimes, we get kind of bogged down when we hear of, with some Black history, it always doesn't have the best of slant. And this one got a good slant. It's a great way. I appreciate you telling this. Everybody at Strong Inspirations, this is what we do. I never heard of him. And I'm not just talking about my guest either, but somehow I found my guest. He agreed to come on and tell us this story. And I appreciate that you've done this. And so to my viewers, come on, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button on this video, particularly hit the like button, because I'm telling you, it's going to motivate you. And then tell some people, we're going to, let me ask you this. Have you written a book? Is there a book out about him or something like that?
That's what I'm telling you. Right now, I'm working on a chapter in a book on Black Appalachians.
We're gonna figure that out. We're gonna promote that book on the channel. To you, my guest, I want to say I thank you so very much for coming on, and I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind, because we really appreciate what you're doing. We're going to say bye-bye for now. We out.
Thank you, Anthony.